Hello, everyone. Welcome on into the Rooted podcast. Of course, brought to you by our fantastic friends over at Green Bros, home of the world's premier cannabis harvesting solutions. Check them out, greenbros.com, if you want to learn more. By the way, I'll tell you more about them in just a second. Tim Stramo coming to you from our beautiful but freezing cold Rooted podcast facility out here in Denver, Colorado. Thanks for being with us. Whether it's on iTunes, SoundCloud, stayrooted.com, we love that you're listening. By the way, don't forget to subscribe to the show if you're listening. Leave us a review so we can continue to grow the show. Super thankful for the great reviews we've been getting lately. Much appreciated. Also, be sure to check out the TV platform, which has been a ton of fun to work on this past year. We do have some upcoming announcements we're going to be sharing soon about that TV platform. So you want to pay attention to our website or social channels. It's at Stay Rooted across the board, all on the website as well. And you can check out our show on Cannabis Club TV, channel 404, or stayrooted.com, the TV platform. Really excited for the show today, guys. We've been touching on some hot topics in the cannabis space. Recently, we talked with Alan Brockstein of New Cannabis Ventures and 420 Investor, all about cannabis stocks. And we've been talking about a lot of cannabis industry tech. Well, today we're hitting another highly confusing but interesting topic, and that's cannabis banking. Now, in case you are unaware or you live under a rock, you'll want to know that many cannabis cultivators, dispensaries, even ancillary companies who just support the industry, whether it's tech or whether it's other services to support the cannabis space, they've been dealing with a lot of banking issues. These large banks like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and so on, well, they're federally insured, which creates a conflict of interest there because cannabis is still federally illegal. So most of those banks won't touch cannabis-related businesses. Now, because of that, banking has been a huge challenge, and many companies have had their accounts frozen. They've had their accounts shut down altogether. So, what is the solution? Is there a solution? And if there is a solution, how reliable is it given the current state of illegality and uncertainty in the cannabis industry? Well, to answer those questions, we went out and we got an expert on this subject, Jordan Friedman, founder and CEO of Zodaka, a payment platform that wants to solve these problems for the industry. Now, Zodaka isn't just it's not just first a payment platform to hit the industry. Let me start that over. Excuse me. We'll cut that. Zodaka isn't the first payment form to hit the industry, but it is one of the latest, and they're approaching the idea differently from previous companies. So we're going to talk about all of that when we bring Jordan in just a second. Real quick, want to let you know our podcast brought to you by our good friends over at Green Bros, home of the world's premier dry harvesting solutions. From small-scale cultivations all the way up to big commercial grows, Green Bros dry trimmers, trichome extractors, de-stemmers, sorting machines, precision batchers, and much more. Want to save you time, money, and labor. Check them out, greenbros.com, or call 844-DRY-CHIM to schedule a free demo in your area today. That's 844-DRY-TRIM. Okay, without any further ado, let's go ahead and welcome in our guest for this afternoon. Again, he is the founder and CEO of Zodaka, Jordan Friedman. Jordan, how are you, my good man? Thanks for joining us, buddy.
Tim, thank you so much for having us and it's great. You know, I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really excited to talk about all the things you just talked about and go in depth, and we'll have a great show today.
And for those listening at home, of course, we'll link the website in the description of the podcast. It's just zodaka.com. It kind of sounds like Neil Sedaka. That's kind of funny. Did he? Has anyone ever told you that?
That's the first time I've heard that. I get a lot of different things on that one, but you're the first, so there's some originality there.
And you mentioned off the top of the show that pronouncing, your company's name has been an issue, so maybe that'll help. Neil Zodaka.
Yeah. What we find is that once you got it, it sticks with you. It's just we got to figure out how to communicate, how to say it.
So no reserves, no shutdowns, entirely domestic, always. That's the company's tagline. Now, I want to talk about the company in just a second, but I have to bring this up out of the gate for people who are watching this or hearing this, and they say, oh, man, this looks like a young guy. I don't necessarily think of banking solutions when I think of a younger entrepreneur. I was young once. I wasn't sitting here thinking, you know what I want to do? I want to tackle banking. Doesn't seem very fun. So tell me about your background and how you got into this idea of wanting to tackle banking solutions in the cannabis space.
Yeah, so my background is that I am just born to be an entrepreneur as a kid. I was always starting companies, and that was always what I wanted to do. When I turned 18, I was not nearly as excited about voting or any of the other benefits that come with being 18 as I was as just to be able to start and own my own company. 7 days after I was 18, I had a corporation in my name, and that was like my dream come true right there. So I got into cannabis originally with my dad, starting a completely different business that we don't do, that no longer exists. But the idea was basically there to do a delivery service with a big tech focus, kind of similar to what Ease is doing now. And this was a couple years back. And as we went through that process and really learned about the industry and saw what was going on, my dad and I had focused in on that there was a big gap in the operational aspect and that problem needed to be solved, and that there was a big gap in banking and specifically payments. We were like, no one is really solving this payment issue, and it doesn't look like there is going to be a route to getting it unless someone does. So after about a year and a half of kind of working on a different project with where we incorporated a payments focus, we said, let's drop everything and let's just do payments. And in that time, I had worked for a payments company as an agent and had sold payment solutions. And I had done a huge research project for, over 2 years, basically learning everything I could possibly learn about how payments work, how it goes to the Fed, the different banks involved, the different types of transactions, the different regulations about those that come around those transactions to really find how we could solve this problem. And after a lot of time, we believed, and we had lawyers check to make sure that we had actually found something that was feasible. And that is the genesis of Zodaka, from like seeing that payments was the problem, but that was not our core focus, from switching to let's just do payments and let's not work on the operational front. So yes, I'm young, but for the cannabis industry, I've been in it for over like 4 years at this point, which is, that's like dog years and for cannabis. And yeah, the banking and money movement aspect had always been fascinating to me and to our partners. And we that was the thing that needed solving the most. And it is interesting whenever we go to like banking or payment conferences to be the youngest person there. But what's come up is there's this wonderful kind of offshoot called fintech, financial technology. And banks have to be pretty risk adverse because they deal with money, and they're very conservative and kind of, because they're institutions, they're not the quickest innovators, but they have 100% recognized that partnering with technology companies is a great way to let someone else innovate on the information and what they have, and not necessarily take that risk, but to really benefit that process. And there's this beautiful kind of marriage and partnership that has sprung up that's all about that. And that's exactly where we fall. And so you get a lot of new, fresh faces coming in to the banking side and the payment side and the other risk and fraud side of the equation. And that's how we got here.
And Jordan, not to harp on the youth that you have, but I have to follow up. When you go into these potential clients and you're pitching them this idea or saying you need to get involved with us, do you feel like they see you as, oh, what does this young kid know? Or have you felt any kickback like that? And how have you dealt with that? How do you convince those people that, hey, I know what I'm talking about. Here's what to do. Here's what's going on.
Well, it's funny because I look a little older than I am.
It's the beard.
It's the beard. It's all the beard. And so that helps. What happens a lot of the time is we get right to the conversation, and they see that I know a ton. I mean, I can talk about any form of money movement and most of the regulations around them, and like with the highest level bankers. And at one point in the conversation, they kind of get themselves like, how old are you? And we tell them, and they're just like, huh. And then it just keeps going there, because it's kind of recognized at this point in technology and just in society that young people innovate and have a different take on things. And when you come with the knowledge base and it's very clear you know what you're talking about, it actually becomes a benefit. So to answer your question directly, I think that there is a little of that, but I see it as an advantage. People want fresh faces. They want to hear what quote unquote millennials are thinking and doing. We're kind of setting the trends for the future, and they actually get excited. And I think that's a really cool thing that we're at that phase in society now.
So Zodaka, where does the name come from? Because it seems like something that, I don't know, maybe did you just come up with it? Is there some sort of family explanation? Tell us about it.
The name is a word I came up with when I was on a trip with my dad. And kind of after the word was created, I realized that it was basically a combination of two other words. And so there's the zodiac, which is kind of the whole circle of life, or just, the whole. And there's Zodaka, which is a Hebrew word for giving to charity. So we kind of, after it was created, we kind of realized that it means it's the idea of giving to the whole to make it better. And if you think about our logo, it's a hot air balloon lifting up a city. So this is us trying to bring the whole up by adding to it.
So before I guess we get to the nitty gritty of what Zodaka does, tell me why we're trying to solve this problem. Why are we here? What is the problem with banking in the cannabis space right now that your company's looking to address?
Yeah, so you kind of said it in the very beginning. Cannabis is federally illegal. Banks are super risk adverse and don't want to mess with the feds, and so there isn't really any or very many financial services. Now, we're not the company solving the problem of getting businesses bank accounts. We have some partners we work with. We can point you in the right direction. What follows after having a bank account is that you need payment processing electronically. There's a huge cash problem in the industry. People get robbed. It's hard to pay taxes. It's hard to do business. You need lots of armored trucks. I mean, there's a whole cottage industry within this cottage industry that is sprung up around just like armored truck and security services. One of the metrics we see is that it's dispensaries have to pay to guard doors, and that's expensive in and out of there. So we are not here to get companies bank accounts. What we've seen is that there's a lot of creative solutions out there, whether it's, multiple holding companies, or they have a deal worked out, or it's a small bank or credit union that said we're actually going to serve the cannabis industry. Those bank accounts have to be highly restrictive. And so whatever it is, once you have a bank account, you still need a good payment system. And that's where we sit in this equation.
Interesting. Okay, I want to expunge on that. Tell me how companies are kind of getting around that problem now, and then what kind of is the downfall to what they're currently doing? What sort of risk they're leaving themselves open for by not using a platform like yours, but using some solutions that are on the market right now?
Yes. So there are a lot of solutions out there, and they range in legality. Some are totally illegal. Some are trying to hide. Some are pretty legal. What we see is that there's offshore credit and debit card solutions. That means that there's a foreign bank processing the transaction, and they're miscoding it. It's illegal, and it's that almost always gets shut down within 3 to 6 months. It's extremely expensive. There's high reserves. You get card declensions. Consumers' accounts can be frozen because it looks like fraud, because you were in California one day, but then all of a sudden you have a transaction in Cyprus the next. That's one thing we see. That gets shut down. And we see merchants basically get robbed because they have the reserves, and sometimes they can recoup it, sometimes they can't. There's a point of banking solution. It's called a cashless ATM. What that means is that it's where you put in your debit card, you put in your PIN, and usually the consumer gets charged a couple dollar fee. Sometimes the business does too. that solution is miscoding transactions. So it shows up like an ATM transaction, but it's not, clearly. And that's something that when you go fully recreational, you are asked to get rid of those solutions in most cases because they're not compliant. That's misusing the ATM network. Those are kind of the main illegal solutions. There are some other ones out there, or non-compliant, but those are the main ones that we see. Then there's kind of this space that our competitors and we fall into to some extent, is where there's all the people who have said that they've solved the problem. We see money services businesses. That's where a company that does payments is partnering with a bank or banks and getting a license, and it's extremely regulated. That's one solution. It comes with its own ups and downs. Basically, you need to fall into full compliance within your state, and it's got lots of restrictions around it. It can take many days for the money to come in. They're filing SARs, which is suspicious activity reports, on every single transaction. Those solutions, basically, the trade-off that they've made is that they move very slowly, but they're constantly working with banks and the government. But you can still get shut down. We've talked to people who've used those solutions, and you can still get shut down. You're basically at the whim of whatever bank it is, and a lot of banks will put caps on how many cannabis companies they're willing to work with.
So what is Zodaka and how does it work? What's the difference there?
That's the last one. So we are a payment gateway. So we're not a payment processor, and we enable an environment to facilitate direct transactions between a consumer and a business. There's no credit cards involved. There's no debit cards involved. We never touch or hold the money. We're routing data to make the transaction happen. And we basically, because we sit in this space of we're just technology, fall outside of basically all the regulations. The type of transaction that we do is most similar to cash that we've made electronic. And that is a big benefit for our consumers and our businesses, because we are bank agnostic. We are not forcing you to use a bank and to accept their fees and their risk level and mitigation and their compliance. And we can get companies underwritten a lot more quickly. Everyone else in the space takes basically a month or more to underwrite, and you can't let your consumers on the platform right away in most cases. We can let consumers transact instantly once they've signed up, and we can get companies underwritten in about 2 business days. So we have a very high scalability advantage, and it's very attractive to our merchants.
So what's interesting is I'm going to need more of an explanation. Okay, I need the explanation you give to a potential company, maybe like a dispensary. Yeah. How do you break it down? Because I'm sure they want to know, okay, a customer comes in, they need to give me money, I need to get money. You're handling the in-between the transaction. How does that work?
How Zodaka works. The merchant needs to have a bank account and needs to have gone through our underwriting process. Once they have that, they get a Zodaka payment button on their website. So when the consumer goes to pay, they'll hit the checkout and they'll see a pay with Zodaka option. If they already have an account, that means they've connected to their bank, and they hit that pay button. It takes them to Zodaka's website. They log in, they hit the pay button on our website, and then it redirects them back. And within a couple days, the money will show up in the merchant's account. If the consumer doesn't have an account, then they hit the pay button, they go to the Zodaka website, they sign up. It's like 7 fields of information. And then they hit the pay button on the Zodaka website, and they get taken back to the merchant's website, and the money is in transition to the merchant's account. And it's that simple every single time.
So then when the consumer gives the money through Zodaka, it comes to the business. They have an account with you, like you mentioned. Now, where does that money go for the dispensary, for example? It has to live somewhere, right? And then how do they go about taking that and doing something with it?
Yes. So this is one of our selling points, is that we never hold or touch the money. So in traditional types of transactions, when you get a merchant account, there's a bank that's an intermediary that's accepting the money on the merchant's behalf and then forwarding it to them, basically. Or they can forward it directly. There's a couple ways, but in essence, there's a bank involved. With us, it's bank to bank, but there's not another bank as an intermediary to make that money, move. So because of that, the money just goes directly into the merchant's bank account that they already have. They're not setting up another bank account to be able to accept this money. They're using what they already have, and that's a huge benefit to them because basically every other company is saying you have to use this bank account, you have to accept the fees that come with it, and you're basically at your bank's whim. We wanted to let businesses leverage what they've already done. What we find is that a lot of businesses in the cannabis space have a bank account. Where that stands is up to them. That's their business. Whether they know a banker there or however they have it worked out, that's up to them. Ultimately, we're sending the money where they tell us to send it to, and that's that. We're not being an intermediary. We don't want to be. It comes with a ton of other regulations, and it's the best way to do business in this space because it allows everybody to work with what they've got.
Now, in the pre-interview, it says that you're just moving into the cannabis sector now. Were you in another sector with Zodaka, or is Zodaka specifically meant for the cannabis industry?
It was this is a good question. We are in another sector. We're in CBD and other kind of high-risk e-commerce stuff, but primarily CBD. And it was built for cannabis, but we wanted to use e-commerce as our proof of concept to kind of work out the kinks, make sure everything's working, build up a track record of success, and get some data about what's actually going on.
Very interesting. We're talking with Jordan Friedman, the founder and CEO of Zodaka. Real quick, again, I want to let you know this podcast brought to you by our wonderful friends over at Green Bros, home of the world's premier dry harvesting solutions. You have to check out their Alchemist machines, which take the wonderful trim created by your Green Bros dry trimmer and turn it into gold. All you do is you insert your trim into the machine. It tumbles the crystals right off the leaves, leaving you with a beautiful product and further profit. Stop selling your trim for minimum value or even throwing it away like I've seen at some cultivation facilities, and get yourself a Green Bros dry trimmer and an Alchemist so you can maximize your profits today. Go ahead and check them out, greenbros.com, or call 844-DRY-TRIM to schedule a free demo in your area today. That's greenbros.com or 844-DRY-TRIM. Jordan, what is the user experience like for Zodaka, for both the consumers and for the business? I'm guessing there's an app or some sort of gateway that they would have on the consumer side, and then I'm sure the dispensaries have some sort of way to access all that as well. Can you explain the front and back end of that?
Totally, yeah. For the consumer, as I kind of mentioned earlier, it's the same workflow as PayPal. You hit the Pay with Zodaka button. That takes you off the business's website onto Zodaka's website. If you have an account, you log in, then hit pay. If you don't, you sign up, then you hit pay. And then after you hit pay, provided the transaction goes through, you're redirected back to the order complete section of the merchant's website. So same flow is PayPal in that sense. For the merchant, what we give them is a back office to understand their transactions, the costs of doing those transactions, what's going on, and reporting any sort of problem or fraudulent activity within the network.
What is it like to get a technology like this off the ground? This is something I'm really interested in because I know that it has to be frustrating. And for me, I think it seems like a chicken or the egg situation in that, do I have customers getting our app and signing up for Zodaka first, or do I have businesses that use our technology that then, the clients would be like, oh, what's this? Let's use that. So how does that work?
Well, first off, it's difficult. It's difficult, especially in fintech. We are in a very sensitive space facilitating the movement of money. The margin for error is low. So it's very difficult. What does that look like? You're talking about the chicken and the egg that any company that's building a network faces. You need merchants so you can get consumers. You need consumers so you can get merchants. We're lucky that the space we operated, not lucky, we made it this way on purpose, but we saw the opportunity that the space we operate in had so many pitfalls for merchants that selling them on a new system would not be as hard. That's basically proven to be true. The merchants we deal with don't have really any good options. And so when we come along, lower rates, we don't hold your money, and you can get it quickly, that's a big deal to them. And we've got a lot of merchants off the ground. We have 50 merchants, 27 mostly doing processing at this point, 6 months in the market, who needed this so badly that they were willing to take a chance. And they've been happy. This has been working. And they see that this is a solution that that has longevity. And that's something that they're not used to. There's no perfect payment system out there, especially for high risk. We're the closest thing most of the merchants have ever gotten. So, and because of that, they're willing to work with us to make sure their consumers use it. They have, our goal as a network is provide so much value, win-win partnerships all the way around, provide so much value to the merchants that they will be willing to push our system. So we do some direct marketing programs in coordination with them. We're investing in getting consumers onto the platform. They've been willing to help too, and it's allowed us to create this environment where they want to work with us. And I think that's unique, and I think it's special, and I think that we angled our system that way on purpose. And so yes, it's difficult to kind of get things going, but our models have been proven out, and so now we can take that anywhere. We can go to any merchant and say, work with us. Here's what we're going to do for you. Here's what it's going to mean for your business. Here's how it's going to help you overall. Here's how you're going to save money. And we're going to need some help. And that's a proposition that, especially in cannabis, where there aren't really set ways of doing things and there are a lot of challenges, they're willing to do.
So correct me if I'm wrong here, but I want to try to summarize this for the people that are listening. Okay, I'm a client for a dispenser, or a consumer for a dispensary. I go in, I use Zodaka, and so what Zodaka is doing is it's taking the money from my bank account and it is coding the transfer between my bank account and the account that the dispensary has through you as well, cutting out the middleman of a bank that would either charge fees or perhaps encode it incorrectly in a way that would create it, make it a legal transaction, basically.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's like giving someone cash. Consumer is pushing the money. You hit the nail on the head. It's consumer pushing the money to the business.
So I've heard in this industry, and I've done some interviews with people who have kind of helped with financial services in terms of getting people bank accounts and helping them operate bank accounts and finding legality in there. But I don't think I've heard of someone who's just attacking this problem of the transaction specifically. So are you the only company that's doing that, or do you have people that are looking to attack the transaction as well? And is there any sort of intellectual property kind of with this system that you've built?
There's definitely intellectual property. It's not where we've looked at patents, and that's a separate conversation. I don't think we really need to get into. But yes, this is something that we're protecting based off of what we know, and what we discovered in research and in working with the banks. Your point is a really interesting one. Most of the other companies we compete with have really tried to work with banks, and we really haven't. So in that sense, yeah, we are basically the only company in the space attacking the transaction itself, and it gives us a lot of speed. We will probably end up working with banks more in closer capacity down the line, but right now we want to build a network and we want to move quickly. And so we just focused on that, and it means, as I said earlier, it means that every company can leverage what they have without us shoving down their throat banking and rates and all this stuff. We can help, but that's not our goal in this industry.
Now, if I don't have Zodaka, but the business I'm trying to buy from or work from does, it is really easy to cross over. I just want to hit that point again. So if I walk into a dispensary and their primary, do you take over all of their payment in the dispensary, or do they still say, okay, if you don't have Zodaka, we can do this, 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 or do you take over fully?
We don't take over fully. In fact, the first rollout of dispensaries will be for online orders. So if you want to order ahead of time and pick up, or if you're a delivery service and you want to order online. So we don't take over fully, and it's very easy for the consumer. And the benefit for the consumer is that we're creating a network. So very soon, consumers in different regional areas will basically they'll need Zodaka because it'll allow them to not have cash, and it's going to work at most of the dispensaries they frequent. So we're creating interoperability, which is a huge value to the consumer. Getting cash every time is a big problem. It's its own risk. It limits what you can spend, and we can take that all away and make it quicker for you to transact and get in, get out, and get your product.
You know, Jordan, what I've always wondered about these kind of solutions with banking, since obviously it's federally illegal and most of these banks won't get involved because of that. If federal legalization happens, let's say it happened tomorrow, it's not going to, but eventually it will be the case where it will happen tomorrow. What does that mean for a system like yours if big banks decide to jump in?
It's a very interesting question. No one knows the exact answer. Because there's so many details involved that make up what happens. In short, it's still going to take time. If banking happens, it doesn't automatically mean that credit cards and debit cards come in. It probably means they will start to a little bit, but we feel that we're going to be the perfect partner to help bring that to market because we'll have this huge network. But it depends so much on what happens. I'll give you one example that'll really illustrate this. If the government keeps it federally illegal, but says it's up to the states and they pass some sort of motion, so it's still Schedule 1, but they're not. That's kind of what the Cole memo did, but that's since been rescinded. If they actually codified that in law, payments would still be a problem. So that's kind of our sweet spot where it's kind of gray, it's kind of confusing. Banks helping is a good thing for the industry, but nothing is going to move super, super quickly. That's just not the nature of banking and of payments. And it leaves room for us to navigate. And that's basically the sentiment, is that we're going to navigate this like everybody else does and is currently doing.
Just a couple more questions with Jordan Friedman, the founder and CEO of Zodaka. You can check out their website, Zodaka.com, linked in the description of the podcast below. No reserves, no shutdowns, entirely domestic, always is their tagline. We're talking about the transaction in payments in the cannabis industry. Jordan, you said something at the top of the show I want to grab some more out of you on, because obviously we like to focus on entrepreneurship in addition to kind of talking about what companies do. And you said that you've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. You started you incorporated your first company a couple of days after you turned 18. What sort of advice, entrepreneurial-wise, have you gotten that you think really hit the nail on the head and is stuff that you try to focus on in running a company?
Man, that's a broad question. I have an answer, but there are so many great resources for advice. I just want to preface that there's lots of entrepreneurship podcasts and stuff. Something that's always stuck out to me is something my dad said. So my dad is my business partner. He's the other co-founder. We have 4 people on the founding team. It was him and I from the outset. He was the first person to really, really believe in me and what we could do together for this industry, and that's sacred. And his business acumen is incredible, and he's been a very successful businessman in his own right. He said that when I was very young, that he was told from his dad, who was also an entrepreneur, the best way to succeed in business is to be in business. And I have seen that play out so many times. We never would have gotten to payment if we weren't working towards something in cannabis to realize that that was the problem that we were best positioned to solve, and that was going to provide the most value if we, if and now when, as we're solving it. The what you can learn, and the big point there is perseverance, right? It's grit. Just being in business day in and day out and keeping to something to make it work is the best way for you to improve yourself and therefore improve your business. Because if you're not just trying really hard day in and day out, you're never going to get to where you need to go to succeed. And I tell people that, and I stick with it, and I fully believe it, that perseverance is like the most important thing. And that comes from just continuing to be in business and to try to make something work. And the caveat there is being open to seeing what's actually happening and pivoting and looking for how to provide the most value. You got to follow the money, and you got to follow the problems to solve them.
Jordan, what does the future look like for Zodaka? Where are you going to be at in the next year, and what's the long-term vision for what you're doing?
So Zodaka in the next year is going to be very focused on cannabis. We are looking to get as much of the market access as possible and start converting that to actual market share. So that means that we want to be in as many dispensaries, deliveries, and up and down the B2B supply chain as much as possible. That's the 1-year plan, and we're sticking to it. Cannabis is the focus. That's why we exist originally, and it's where the biggest opportunity lays. In the 5-year plan, we are looking at a lot of different possibilities because we have incredible data and we're dealing with financial services. We've talked about doing peer-to-peer transfers. We've talked about going international. The crypto conversation has come up. We don't know for sure, but there's a lot of different ways that we could take this, and it's really an open field and an endless horizon for us.
If I'm someone that's listening to this, either as a cannabis consumer or a business, how do I go about getting started with Zodaka?
If you're a business, you got to reach out. We have a merchant contact form and also a partner contact form on our website at Zodaka.com. And if you're a consumer, we have a sign up button, and you cannot use it yet in dispensaries or deliveries. We have other merchants that sell CBD that you could. So if you're looking to CBD, definitely check it out and reach out, hit the support line. And very soon you will be able to use it. First focus will be in California, but more of a national rollout in the following months. I'd say in the next 3 months, a lot will be cropping up in California. In the next 6, more nationally. Within the next year, you will see us in I would say most of the states where we can be.
Jordan, fantastic job on the show, man. I say this all the time, and I always mean it, but you alluded to a couple of cool things coming up and some other potential verticals for Zodaka. So you have news coming up in the next couple of months, 6 months or a year. Make sure you hit us back up. We'll get you back on the show, and we'll talk more all about it. Okay, man?
Yeah, Tim, no, that'd be a pleasure, and we'd love to follow up in 6 months and be like, hey, we're here now.
His name's Jordan Friedman. He's the founder and CEO of Zodaka. Again, hit him up, Zodaka.com. And don't forget to hit us up. Go ahead and visit our social channels at Stay Rooted across the board. Check out our TV platform at stayrooted.com or Cannabis Club TV channel 404. We will have some new announcements for you, some exciting stuff in the coming weeks, about a month from now maybe. Almost alluded to it on the show a couple of times, but I'm going to keep my mouth shut or else I could get in trouble. But my name has been Tim Strombel. This is the end of the show. I'll remind you one more time to work hard, be humble, and stay rooted. See you next week, everybody.